The hospital room was sterile, cold, a stark contrast to the warmth of my childhood home, where laughter once echoed through the halls. I lay on the stiff bed, my body trembling, not from the chill of the air conditioning but from the weight of the decision that had just been made. My parents, faces etched with desperation, stood at the foot of my bed, their eyes avoiding mine. They had always been my anchor, the ones who tucked me in at night, who cheered at my school plays, who promised to protect me. But now, their voices were distant, hollow, as they spoke to the doctor in hushed tones. "Take her organ," my mother whispered, her voice cracking. "Save our son." My brother, Ethan, was dying, his heart failing, his body frail. I was his only match, the only one who could give him a chance at life. But at what cost? My mind spun, replaying memories of us as kids, running through fields, stealing cookies from the jar, promising to always have each other's backs. How did we end up here? The doctor explained the procedure, the risks, the recovery. I was only 17, barely old enough to understand the gravity of it all. My body would be cut open, a piece of me taken to save him. I wanted to scream, to ask why it had to be me, but the words caught in my throat. I loved Ethan. I'd do anything for him. But the betrayal stung. My parents hadn't even asked me. They'd decided, as if my body wasn't my own. As the nurse prepped me for surgery, I stared at the ceiling, tears streaming down my face, wondering if I'd ever feel whole again. The days leading up to the surgery were a blur of tests, needles, and whispered conversations I wasn't meant to hear. My parents hovered around Ethan, their focus entirely on him. I understood he was sicker, his condition more urgent, but it didn't dull the ache in my chest. I'd always been the strong one, the one who held things together when mom cried or dad worked late. Now, I felt invisible. At night, I'd lie awake, tracing the cracks in the hospital ceiling, imagining what life would be like after. Would Ethan thank me? Would my parents look at me with pride? Or would they forever see me as the means to an end? The surgeon had warned that donating my kidney could mean complications, pain, infections, a lifetime of caution. I didn't care about that as much as I cared about being seen, being valued. I wanted to be more than a vessel for their salvation. My best friend Lila visited when she could, sneaking in snacks and trying to make me laugh. "You're a hero, Sarah," she'd say, but her words felt empty. Heroes choose their battles. I hadn't been given a choice. I overheard my father on the phone, reassuring someone that it's all under control. Under control for who? I wondered. The night before the surgery, I wrote in my journal, spilling my fears onto the page. I didn't want to resent Ethan, but a part of me did. Why was his life worth more than mine? Why didn't anyone ask if I was okay? The morning of the surgery, the hospital was buzzing with a quiet intensity. Nurses moved swiftly, their shoes squeaking on the polished floor. I was wheeled into the operating room, the bright lights blinding me as the anesthesiologist murmured soothing words. I wanted to ask for my parents, to see their faces one last time before I went under. But they were with Ethan. Always with Ethan. The mask was placed over my face, and the world faded to black. When I woke, pain radiated from my side, sharp and unrelenting. The room was dim, the beeping of machines a steady rhythm. I reached for my side, feeling the bandages, the stitches that held me together. A nurse noticed I was awake and offered a kind smile. "You did great, Sarah," she said. But did I? I felt hollow, like a part of me had been carved out, not just the organ, but something deeper. My parents came in later, their faces a mix of relief and exhaustion. "Ethan's surgery went well," my mother said, her hand squeezing mine, but her words felt like an afterthought. I wanted to ask if they were proud of me, if they understood what I'd given up. Instead, I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. The days that followed were a haze of painkillers and checkups. Ethan was recovering in another wing, and I hadn't seen him yet. I wondered if he even knew what I'd done for him. Recovery was slow, agonizing. Every movement felt like a betrayal of my own body. The scar on my side was a constant reminder of what I'd lost, not just a kidney, but a piece of my trust in my family. My parents visited daily, but their conversations were always about Ethan, his progress, his strength, his future. I wanted to scream that I was here too, that I was hurting, that I needed them. But I didn't. I'd learned long ago to swallow my pain, to be the strong one. Leela was my lifeline, sneaking me magazines and telling me about school, about the world outside these sterile walls. She'd joke about how I'd be back to running track in no time, but we both knew it wasn't true. The doctors had been clear. My life would never be the same. I'd have to avoid contact sports, watch my diet, live carefully. It wasn't just the physical limitations, it was the emotional weight. I felt like I'd been sacrificed for Ethan's second chance. One night, I overheard my parents arguing in the hallway. My mother was crying, saying they'd made the right choice. My father wasn't so sure. What if we lose her too? He whispered. It was the first time I'd heard him acknowledge the risk to me. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Weeks passed, and I was finally allowed to see Ethan. He looked better color in his cheeks, a spark in his eyes that had been missing for months. He hugged me, his arms weak but warm. "Thank you, Sarah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I wanted to feel joy, to bask in his recovery, but all I felt was a quiet resentment. He didn't know what it cost me. He didn't know how it felt to be chosen last. We talked for a while, about nothing important: movies, music, the hospital food. It was the first time in months we'd felt like siblings again, but when he fell asleep, I sat by his bed, watching him breathe, wondering if he'd ever understand. Back in my room, I started writing again, pouring my anger, my hurt, my love for him onto the page. It was the only way I could make sense of it all. My parents noticed the change in me, the distance I kept. They tried to bridge it with small gestures, bringing my favorite snacks, talking about my future, but it felt like too little, too late. I wanted an apology, an acknowledgement that they'd taken something from me without asking, but they never offered one. When I was discharged, life at home felt like walking on eggshells. Ethan was still weak, but he was home too, and the house revolved around him. My parents tiptoed around his needs, while I was expected to bounce back, to be the strong one again. I tried to talk to them once, to tell them how I felt, but the words came out wrong. My mother cried, saying they'd had no choice. My father just looked away. I stopped trying after that. School was a welcome escape, though I couldn't run track anymore. My friends treated me differently, some with pity, others with awe. I hated both. Lila was the only one who treated me like me, not the girl who'd given up a kidney. I started therapy, something my parents reluctantly agreed to. The therapist helped me unpack the anger, the betrayal, the love that still tethered me to my family. She told me it was okay to feel all of it, to not have to choose between love and resentment. For the first time, I felt like someone was listening. I started to reclaim pieces of myself, through writing, through art, through late-night talks with Lila, but the scar remained. A physical and emotional reminder of what I'd been through. Months turned into a year, and Ethan was thriving. He was back at school, playing soccer, living the life I'd helped give him. I was proud of him, but the pride was bittersweet. My parents began to notice me more, to ask about my day, my dreams, but the damage was done. I couldn't unfeel the abandonment, the sense that I'd been a means to an end. I started planning for college, for a life away from home. I wanted to find myself, to be more than the girl who saved her brother. My therapist encouraged me to confront my parents, to tell them how their choice had hurt me. It took weeks to build up the courage. One night, over dinner, I finally spoke. The words poured out raw, messy, honest. I told them about the fear, the pain, the feeling of being invisible. My mother sobbed. My father reached for my hand. They apologized, not just for the decision, but for not seeing me. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Ethan, who'd been listening quietly, hugged me afterward, saying he'd never known how much I'd carried. For the first time, I felt like he saw me, not just as his sister, but as someone who'd sacrificed for him. Life didn't magically fix itself after that night. Healing was slow, like the scar that still ached when I moved the wrong way. But I was learning to forgive not just my parents, but myself for the resentment I'd held onto. I started writing a blog, sharing my story anonymously. The responses poured in: people who'd felt invisible, who'd made sacrifices no one acknowledged. It gave me purpose, a way to turn my pain into something meaningful. Ethan and I grew closer, talking more openly about what we'd been through. He started volunteering at the hospital, inspired by what I'd done for him. My parents were trying. 2 small steps, like family dinners where we all talked, really talked. I wasn't the same girl I'd been before the surgery, and I never would be. But I was finding a new version of myself, one who was stronger, not because I had to be, but because I chose to be. The scar was still there, but it wasn't just a mark of loss anymore. It was a mark of survival, of love, of the messy, complicated beauty of being human.